in Scripture is you see the individual existed for the church, that faith community, and then that faith community existed for the world. So the individual existed for the community of believers, and those believers existed for the greater good of the world. I think what we have too often now is instead the individual now is at the center of it, and the individual perceives that the world exists for me, and consequently, so does the church also exist for me. And so I'm kind of at the center of everything, and I think it totally distorts what was God's dream and then Jesus' dream for what the church should be. And so, I mean, I guess in short, the thing I would love for us to leave behind is that kind of a consumeristic mindset. Real life is found when you exist for other people, and then those other people exist for the world. And so that's the part I would love to keep. Most of the successful large churches, if you get close enough and begin, kind of look at them with a microscope, what you'll find is actually the infrastructure is lots of small groups. I mean, at this point in time, I mean, with the variety of entertainment there is, you'd have to put on an unbelievable show to be able to hold the attention, of 2, 3, 4, 10,000 people on a weekly basis. And in a lot of the larger churches, what you'd actually find is there's probably, like in our church, I mean, so it's a fairly large church, and we have 6,000 people that show up on a weekend. But if you look more closely, what you'll actually find is that about 75% of those people are actually in groups. And I think what actually happens is then the truth is, I don't have to be, the world's greatest speaker. We don't have to have the world's greatest band. It's nice. It's kind of fun, right? If you get a real motivational talk, it's great. If you have great music, but I'm really showing up because these are my people. I get to see my small group, my friends, and hang out for a while. I'm there because I like these people and we're on mission together. What you see in the United States is, I mean, there is a decline in the church attendance. Kind of, I mean, because you have now about 18% of the people be in church on any given weekend. Although there is, even within that subset, while there's an overall decline, there's actually an increase in the number of people that are attending evangelical churches. And there's a huge, I shouldn't say huge, I'm overstating it, as all Americans do. But there is an increase in church planting as well, which is exciting. So there's a net gain in brand new churches being started. Now, if you've traveled to Australia, you probably have, you're probably more like 10% of the folks will be in church any given weekend. And probably in a lot of places, like in your context, in Amsterdam stuff, you're probably, 2 or 3% of the population? I think in that regard, as far as the post-Christian era, I think, Europe's clearly ahead of us. The one thing is I do get a chance to travel, though. What I do see is I see a return to the original apostolic ethos, where you begin to see the church as movement. You see the church as a community, and not just as a community as we've been talking about, but also a community, but also as a movement. I think movement is probably best described as kind of in a simple equation of missional people plus multiplying churches equals a missional movement. So kind of 2 parts equals a third part. Missional people plus multiplying churches equals a missional movement. Now that's, I think that's simple, but it's not easy to do. So I don't want people who may listen and are thinking, oh, that's way reductionistic. No. I think it is simple to understand, but I'm not saying it's easy to do. And I think we see more and more churches grabbing a hold of this idea that, okay, we have to find a way to mobilize missional people, that first part of the equation, to mobilize every person for mission. That conversion does equal commissioning. That baptism is your ordination. And I am so excited about that. I think that is such good news for the church. And I think that's where we need to continue to head. I think it's both a part of the future, but the cool part is I think it's also kind of back to the future. It's also a part of the past. I think it's a part of that New Testament apostolic ethos. So if you have that, think about whatever church you're involved in. If you have, 100% of those folks on mission, and then you start reproducing that over and over again, multiplying, pretty soon that it's kind of like 2 pedals of a bike, I guess. You got the pedals in the bike, and you got one pedal with missional people, and then one pedal with multiplying churches, missional people, multiplying church, and you're pushing both those pedals. And pretty soon you start pushing both those pedals, and pretty soon you start to get momentum. And pretty soon what you have over time is you have movement. And I don't talk about movement just for movement's sake, but movement. Go back to Acts 1:8. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, ends of the earth, Jesus' last kind of vision to his church. Movement is how you accomplish the mission. That's why it's so important. And I'm really optimistic for the West. I think there's an increase in desire to be missional. I think there's an increase in desire in this multiplication, church planting. I think there's an increased desire in global partnerships, which I think make those things even more possible. And I think there's a lot more conversation about movement making, which to me was completely consistent with Jesus' vision for the church, which I think makes the mission possible.